Welcome to Inside Boxing Weekly on the Grueling Truth, or Inside Boxing Daily on the Grueling Truth Sportsnet. Inside Boxing Daily is brought to you by MyBookie.ag. To get up to a $1,000 cashback bonus on your first deposit, make sure you go to thegruelingtruth.com and just hit the banner. It'll take you right there. Also, Jackie Richardson and Alex Ramos at the Retired Boxers Foundation. All right, guys, I'm your co-host, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my other co-host, Jeremiah Preisser. What's up, Jeremiah?
What's up, man? Yeah, and just so everybody knows, we are now a .com website. We made the transition not long ago, so be sure to take that into account whenever you're visiting the site. I mean, even if you click on .net, we also own that as well.
Yeah, but we own the world, Jeremiah.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting close. And if any of you fuckers can write or podcast or whatever, get a hold of us.
That was so professional to get a podcaster. If any of you fuckers can write, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get the show started because this sounds like it might be a cluster before we're done, which makes it good. All right, we're going to start off with Jarrell Big Baby Miller. And he says he never knowingly took any banned substances while preparing for his fight against Anthony Joshua, Jeremiah.
Yeah, I believe him. So let's just go ahead and get that, pushed through and, move it. Yeah, we're good. Okay, that's all I got to say.
Now, wouldn't you rather believe him so we don't have to watch Manuel Char do it?
Dude, I got to be honest. I mean, there is a moral conflict there. It's like, I know Miller's a cheater, and I'm pretty outspoken against PEDs and whatnot, but I mean, just thinking about the potential options there, it's horrible, man. But everybody's going to say that they unknowingly ingested this stuff. It's typical. I mean, you hear the crap all the time, and they're like, apparently they're supposed to test his B sample. I don't even know what the hell that is going to do, honestly. I mean, the dude obviously took some shit. If his B sample comes up, free and clear, it could just be that he used a masking agent or something else that it just might be a masking agent or something. I don't know.
Well, here is the response from Jarrell Miller, who said, "My team and I stand for integrity, decency, and honesty, plus free Big Macs for all. And together we will stand to fight this with everything we have. This was a voluntary test that I was very happy to do. And these results came just 1 week after another voluntary test that I had taken, which was completely clean. I refuse to just lie down and let my dream be taken away from me when I know in my heart that I've done nothing wrong. 15 years of hard work. I'm warrior. I don't need a banned substance." I think he means I'm a warrior, but he said I'm warrior. And he said, "Remember, don't believe everything you hear and see. The facts will prevail, and I shall be vindicated." I think he meant vindicated. "And I don't have anything to hide, and the truth will make itself known."
So he must have put that PR, he must put that press release out on Facebook because that's over the character limit for Twitter. But
yeah, because, this is the thing. Like, when you watch old movies and you have gladiators and warriors, usually one of them is like a 6'5", 330-pound fat ass.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and typically the warrior gets bigger and bigger as time passes. So
this one does too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he's a warrior, but it's funny because when you read the side effects of the stuff that he took, the cardarine, it just almost it kind of tells you a little bit about him. I mean, John has, he's talked a bit about Miller and he likes Miller and he's like, yeah, it's that kickboxer's stamina. Typically, they're pretty good with that stuff, and it could be that cardarine which is doing it because that's one of the side effects of that drug. So again, don't believe everything you hear. I mean, why is stuff even in your system? And again, this is New York, so who knows? I mean, they already denied him a license, so the fight's not going to happen. But, we know how the heavyweight division is, right? I mean, Luis Ortiz has already been popped for PEDs. He's one of the names that's being thrown around. So, again, this is a division where you can get away with that sort of stuff easier easier than any other sport, really. I mean, so you're going to be forgiven at some point. I mean, he'll serve a suspension. He'll be back in line for it, and he'll just try to clean up his act. But it is what it is. It's not the fight's not going to happen. They're going to look to secondary options, and that's just what we're going to have to deal with.
All right, and now let's go to a little bit of more of what was it Larry Merchant used to call it, the theater of absurd, which has become all of boxing anymore. And today, two-time Olympic gold medalist and current IBF, WBA, WBC, WBO female middleweight champion Clarissa Shields, with her devastating record of 9 wins and 2 knockouts, said she'd beat WBA Super World welterweight champion Keith one-time Thurman and WBC 147-pound Sean Porter, and give former middleweight champion Gennady Golovkin a lot of problems. And this is her statement. She told TMZ, which that's where you go when you have a statement to make. I spar with men, and I mean I drop men. I bust men nose. Once again, I think she meant men's, but she said I bust men nose. I beat men up all the time. If I was to say which is the guy I think I could beat, I think I could beat up Keith Thurman. I really do. I think I could beat up Keith Thurman. And even though they're like, oh, he beat Sean Porter, well, I think I could beat Sean Porter too. You know, skill-wise and just strength-wise, I think they may be stronger than me, but their boxing ability is not like mine.
You know what? I got to be honest. If I was Keith Thurman or Sean Porter, I'd be kind of offended. I mean,
oh, hell yeah.
It's like of all the names that she picks in the entire boxing world, she throws yours out there. You know, she thinks she's more skillful than you. Yeah, if I was Keith Thurman, I'd set that match up and beat some ass.
Get this real quick. There's a writer named Chris Williams for Boxing News 24, which I just found, and what he wrote after her statement was this: Shields may be right. She's got the talent to give Thurman and Porter something to think about if they come to mix it with her. Shields is so far ahead of the other female boxers right now that it's almost unfair. The way she handled Hammer last Saturday night was a thing of beauty. She dominated Hammer in every sense of the word. Before the fight, Hammer had glided through her first 4 fights effortlessly, looking like she would never lose. Shields was so much better than her. Shields wants to take on the talented champion Cecilia Brakehouse next. Now, then Shields gets even stupider, and yes, that's a word when we talk about Clarissa Shields because I've heard her use it repeatedly. She said, Triple G, he's older now, but I could give Triple G a run for his money. If I was to get in with a man, I would do a lot more of that, and I do have some power. I do have some power. She said that twice. She's trying to convince herself, too. I'm not going to say I'm stronger than them, but if I set up the right shot with the right timing, that's what she said. I mean, she has fought 9 female fights, 10 2-minute rounds, and has knocked 2 women out, but she's going to give Triple G some problems.
Okay, so who's the guy who wrote that article again? Because we got to put him on the watch list with the other dude.
Chris Williams. I think he writes for the Special Olympics boxing newsletter, but I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah. So we're going to put him on the watch list along with
him
and Eric are on the list now. Okay, listen, Gennady Golovkin's brother, who is no longer a boxer, would spread her like butter over toast. Okay, she's not getting anywhere near Gennady Golovkin. Honestly, all it would take is about one jab and one right hand or one left hook, and that would be it. I mean, it's funny because when this guy's writing, that she's just, bulldozing all of her opponents, well, I seem to remember Hannah Gabriel's knocking her down. Yeah. And Gabriel's gave her a tougher fight than Christina Hammer did. So, I mean, that kind of shows you what level we're dealing with when we're dealing with Hammer anyways. I mean, again, it's not, she's beating who's out there. How
about this? Rasheed Warren at 105 pounds would bitch slap her to death.
Yeah. He'd fucking peck and poke his way, to a clear decision. Come on, man. I mean, does biology not exist anymore? I mean, is this the route we're going to go? Is this, Ronda Rousey 2.0 where, Dana White and all these?
I'm sorry.
White and all these.
I just got a message from Twitter that is so bad that I don't think I can read it, but it's absolutely hilarious. Should I read it or should we just keep this fairly clean?
Well, I mean, go ahead and read it. I mean, we've had some smut on the air before.
All right, Matt Jeremy. He says, it's official. Chris Williams is the Q word that's not straight. He believes one. Well, I don't want to say it because I might get in trouble. Now, this is Matt Jeremy's words, not mine. He says he believes one clam bumper beating other clam bumpers qualifies her to fight the best men. Shields is sweet. I would jackhammer the little B word very well. He also talks about, what would happen at the end of that. And as for Chris Williams, he needs to do a queer forum and be a columnist there. Thank you very much for your comments, Matt Jeremy. And Matt Jeremy's comments were Matt Jeremy's comments alone, and I just read them. And my question is Matt Jeremy's dad maybe Ron Jeremy? Because he was very descriptive on what he would do when he used his jackhammer.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Matt. Yeah, I mean, when Shields was going to fight Hammer, I mean, there was a clear victor as to who I would rather hammer, And
Oh, God, will you stop? You're not making this any better. And we have another message from Troy in Pennsylvania.
Uh-oh.
Clarissa Shields is probably a
Troy?
man just like the Williams sisters in tennis. They both had male and female parts. Once again, that was Troy's words, not me.
Yeah, thank you, Troy. I mean, Shields is obviously doing a lot for transsexual athletes here, and doing with the naked poses
trans.
and whatnot.
She's just an ugly girl, and I hate to tell you this, but Christina Hammer is not like real attractive. I mean, if they make her up a certain way, she looks not hideous, and that's about it.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, but again, it's slim pickings. Slim pickings when it comes to female boxing. So you just kind of got to work with what you got there. But
I got another one. I got Raymond Ramirez on Twitter has sent me a message. This has stirred people's emotions.
Keep them rolling.
And he says, all I'm going to say that the owner of this site, Boxing News 24, about a year ago went full retard, and I don't think he's ever coming back.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, the forums are cool there, but the quality of news at that site has been pretty poor for a while now. Again, maybe this guy knows a bit more about when exactly that transition was, when they just started dumbing everything down and scraping the barrel with some of their writers. But I mean, if you guys listen to the show regularly, I mean, we talk about, one other guy who's a WBC cocksucker. I mean, this dude is just all over Suleiman's nuts. He's praising, Canelo Alvarez left and right. And I mean, we honestly think that he's related to the guy. The descriptions are so apt and colorful. It's just, it's nonsensical. And again, I don't hate the website just because of the forums, but you guys are right. I mean, the news and everything and the quality of writers is just piss poor.
Yeah, this site is really sad. And see, the thing is this, when there's not much boxing news, I go to this website, Boxing News 24, just so I can find some funny shit to talk about so I can not be bored. So there's my funny shit to talk about for today. And it seemed like other people enjoyed it too. But I can say this. For Clarissa Shields, by saying that today, once again, she keeps her name in the news. She stays relevant. So, in the end, I don't fault her for this. And maybe she believes she could do this, but I believe probably she doesn't, but she knows that it keeps her name in the news. And for her to be able to keep her name in the news, I think is of utmost importance if she wants to be able to get paid later on.
Yeah, well, and the sad thing is that just about any attention is positive attention in a sense, because like you said, you're keeping your name out there, and boxing is pretty bad when it comes to character development. I mean, that's the one thing, like the MLB and NHL struggle so hard with is they just, guys like, Mike Trout, potential Hall of Famer in the future. If he was walking down Broadway naked, a lot of guys couldn't recognize who he was. That's the problem with these sports, boxing and all these other sports. They're just not developing character. That's
actually,
what
though, Jeremiah, don't you think that says more about you that you wouldn't notice him? Because I could tell you this, any man, if it was Muhammad Ali walking naked down Broadway, I'm not going to notice him, because once I see the penis, I'm immediately looking away.
Well, But that's my thing, though, is if you're walking down Broadway naked, more people are going to look at you, right? So what I'm saying is,
I don't know. I'm going to look away when I see the penis, is all I'm saying. But go ahead.
yeah, well, okay, and that's all good and well. I'm not saying that I'm going to stare at his ding dong and, have it'd be like, well, this guy looks like he's got an inch on me or so. But no, I mean, no, what I'm saying is, I mean, the whole point is that, if he were to do some spectacle like that, just about nobody would recognize him because the character development in these organizations have been so bad. It's like in the NFL, somebody like, Juju Schuster, whatever his name is far more culturally relevant than, these guys are. And it's the same thing with boxing. I mean, a lot of these guys are just unknowns to most. I mean, of course, that's boxing's fault with all the titles and the divisions and all this other stuff that, kind of muddies the waters and helps, the casual fan latch onto the sport. But again, it is one of those things where, even if you don't like her, she is still, because, I mean, just think about the level of attention that she's getting compared to Katie Taylor. She doesn't get, Taylor doesn't get a fraction of this attention because she's not out there, like,
yeah, but
oh,
you know what? Katie Taylor, a year or two from now, is going to be maybe more in Clarissa Shields because she's going to fight in the UK where they love her.
Yeah, I do think there's something to that. I mean, obviously the fans, I mean, she's got a strong following in Ireland. I mean, a lot of Irish guys that I know, and I'm not talking about American Irish guys. I'm talking about people who live in Ireland. They've got an affection for her. She's got just a workman-like demeanor where she just, sticks to her stuff.
She has
doesn't
a good personality.
Sit there
She's the kind of girl that if she's walking down the street, you'd have no problem walking up and saying hi to her, and you don't have to worry that she's going to try to make you look like a fool.
Yeah, she's not the kind of person you would have to worry about saying something to you at an amateur boxing event when you're rooting on your son. She's not that sort of person to, confront you at something like that.
Yeah, but my question is this, Jeremiah. Tyson Fury does stuff like that, but it's okay.
Yeah, I do. But again, I do think there's a difference there. Okay.
You think it's just because he's goofy looking?
No. I think I've elaborated on this before in previous shows.
Yeah, his shit is usually not mean. It's not I want to put you in a coffin.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not so mean spirited, and not only that. Like I've said in the past, a lot of average fans can relate to his previous, like his bad luck, you know what I mean? When he was going through depression and, had a substance abuse problem. I mean, this is a thing that a lot of people are struggling with nowadays. So, for him to overcome that thing and fight with a lot of heart, not check out after being knocked down. A lot of people like that stuff. It's a good comeback story, with Wilder and Shields. They just come across as cocky.
Yeah. All right. Next up, Sergey Kovalev will be defending his WBO 175-pound title in Russia against his unbeaten mandatory challenger, Anthony Yarde. The news announcement for the Kovalev-Yarde fight is expected to take place next week, but I guess they've canceled the little purse bid because they've already come to an agreement here. My question is this. Is this a bad move by Yarde, or is this a tactical chance you're taking at fighting a Kovalev who looks like, even though he did look good against Alvarez in his last fight, it looks like he might be dropping off, so maybe you take your chance here?
Well, I certainly think the latter part of that statement is correct, or the question is correct. I mean, Kovalev is clearly past his best. I mean, you can't really find guys who are in their prime at 36. I mean, a guy like Archie Moore kind of defied, the odds and was able to stick around for a long time. But you got to put that into context as well. I mean, Archie Moore was a great fighter. There's, little doubt about that. He's one of the greatest 175-pounders of all time. I know some people would even have him number one. Not me. That would be Ezzard Charles. But of course, Moore wasn't dealing with as stiff a competition as he got older as well. I mean, instead of the Black Murderers Row and Ezzard Charles and like the Jimmy Bivens of the world and guys like that, he's dealing with the Yvonne Durrells of the world. So his competition became a little softer as time went on. But again, I'm not trying to take too much away from him. He was highly skilled and he was able to get it done. But the greater point is that at 36 years old, you're not in your physical prime. And I think we already know that Kovalev was past his best. I mean, to me,
how about this, though?
once Andre Ward,
when you look at it, fighting Kovalev may be safer because you've got Dmitry Bivol, you got Beterbiev, who's 34, but he hadn't really showed signs of slowing down. I'm not really convinced Beterbiev's that good. But then you got Marcus Brown and Gavodstik. When you look at that, hell, the safer route here may be to take a shot at an older Kovalev.
Yeah. I mean, the division is getting pretty thick. It's he's with even a Brit like Joshua Buatsi coming up. It's arguable that he's not even the best British light heavyweight at the moment. And I'm not sure that he's better than Callum Johnson. I would favor both of them over Callum Johnson. But again, you just have three guys up there. So again, there's less elbow room there. But I think you're right in the sense that Kovalev is older. He is more susceptible than he was in the past. And Yarde is a legitimate puncher. I think he's one of the biggest, in the light heavyweight division. He seems to lack the sort of nuance that you're starting to see from Buatsi, but I'm not sure. Again, he's got to step up his competition for me to be sure. But yeah, it could be that. But then again, it could just be a big miscalculation. Maybe they think he's susceptible, but if Kovalev can box like he did against Eleider Alvarez in the rematch, he's still going to be a real tough out for anybody. I mean, he just, boiled his style down, stuck to the basics, and, he punches so hard that even, touching you is enough to keep your hands at home. So I think to me on paper, it seems like a bad styles fight for him. But Yarde's got good hand speed. He does have good power. I'm not quite sure what his chin is like. I favor Kovalev in that, but, I wouldn't put it past a Yarde win at this juncture.
All right. Yeah, I'm not going to bring up that comment. James, that's racist. Let's see. Francesco says Kovalev will show him levels. It will be pretty one-sided, too. I think that's the way I lean here, just because Yarde, I don't think it showed much improvement until his last fight. I think he did show a little bit of improvement there. I just don't think he's on the same level as Kovalev, and I don't think if Kovalev wasn't too shot when he fought Alvarez the last time, and I know he's got issues with, once you get past the fourth or fifth round, but I don't know that Yarde is talented enough to do this, and I just think it's going to end up being bad for Yarde until he gets the paycheck.
Yeah, no, that's certainly going to be pretty. But, yeah, I mean, I can understand how somebody could see it that way, where they think that he's going to get exposed and, that Kovalev is certainly on another level. I mean, the thing I really like about Kovalev and always has, is he's very good with his 1-2s. I mean, he's fundamental. He sticks to what's effective. He doesn't, break from that all that much, even though he did a little bit in some of his more recent fights where he saw him throw the left hook a bit more. And I thought that was a good thing. But, he's just so good at what he does. And, again, even if he is on the, the plus side of 35 now, you might be right. I mean, he might expose Yarde and get him out of there early. I just fear, again, I'm not predicting Yarde. I am favoring Kovalev. I just, you never know with a guy that age when they're going to hit the wall. And Yarde is a good puncher. So, again, I just there's a little caution there.
All right, so next up, we usually talk about On This Day, but you posted a video to a documentary called I Am Duran, and I see that the release date's 2018. Where do we find this? Do you know that yet? And let's talk a little bit about the documentary and about the man himself.
Yeah, I was actually surprised. I caught wind of this in a Roberto Duran fan group today. And, I'd just been, off busy doing other stuff and been wanting to share it. And, I finally sat down and watched it, and it looks pretty damn interesting. And I encourage everybody to go over there. I'm not quite sure what kind of PR team they have, with this
not a very
movie,
good one,
but
it was released last year, and we're just finding out about it now.
Well, I mean, it's pretty awful. If you look at the Facebook page, what did I see? There was not even 400 likes on it. I mean, when you're dealing with a fighter of that magnitude and with characters of that magnitude, I mean, just go watch the video for it. Mike Tyson is talking about, the Roberto Duran,
Oscar De La
Bob
Hoya,
Arum,
Robert
Don
De Niro.
King. Yeah, Robert De Niro, Don King. Sugar Ray Leonard is in there. I mean, come on, this is a cast full of guys that
Hey, how
boxing
about
fans will
this?
be
They've
familiar
got
with.
Manuel Noriega talking in this movie.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Lennox Lewis, Larry Merchant. I'm on the IMBD site. Ricky Hatton, Marvelous Marvin Hagler. So there's a long list here. And the thing that stuck out to me was when Leonard talked about how hard Duran hit.
Yeah, he said, I'm not sure I can quote him, but I paraphrase him that was the hardest he's ever been hit, and that he had bricks in his gloves or something like that.
It felt like he was being hit with bricks in his gloves.
Yeah, well, I mean, they did a good job. I mean, this isn't some low rent movie or anything. I mean, the highlights were crystal clear. There was no acting, but yeah, no, you could see that. I mean, anybody who watched Roberto Duran's career knows that his nickname was spot on. He really was a fantastic puncher, an all around great, obviously. But yeah, it was interesting. I thought what was interesting is not only Leonard saying, "Hey, that was the hardest I've ever been hit," but I also thought it was interesting how it's kind of a new angle for me, where they're trying to play in a patriotic type thing where he's doing it for his country, and he's talking about how poor he was when he grew up, and him and his family were sleeping in doorways, and he didn't have anything else to turn to but boxing, and it ended up turning out obviously pretty well for him. But yeah, that's what struck me is they insert Ronald Reagan there for a bit, and he's talking about the Panama Canal, and then they skip to George Bush, and he's sending the military in. I thought that was an interesting aspect, and one that I've never explored or heard explored before.
I think the premise was that he gave the nation the courage to rise up and overthrow a dictator or some shit like that. But I think it was probably the American military with all them guns. See, but
yeah,
I mean, I loved Duran growing up, and to me, Duran was one of the greatest of all time. Until he quit against Leonard. But I'm going to try to we're going to look at him here. And, I mean, he's a guy that the lightweight division wasn't real tough, but the way he dominated is what stood out to me. Wasn't his last title defense the Thur de Jesus fight in Vegas? Because I remember watching that on, I think, CBS Sports Saturday. Or the Sports Spectacular, whatever they called it then.
That sounds right. I can't say that I'm 100% sure, though.
And then he moves to welterweight. And you've seen his fight with Carlos Palomino, haven't you?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, because that's one of the most exciting one-sided fights I've ever seen. I mean, because that was actually a hell of a fight. And every round was close, but Duran won every round until Duran just kind of wore him out at the end. But the thing that stood out to me here was the Ray Leonard thing, because I remember watching this, because I think it was on the CBS Sports Spectacular all the time. But he beat a dude by named by Zeferino Gonzalez. He beat I think he won 2 other fights against guys that were pretty much nondescript. They were guys that were like 10-1, 10-2, something like that. And then he got the Leonard shot. And I don't think hardly anybody really gave him much of a chance, just because after the Palomino fight, the Gonzalez fight, I think he fought a guy from Africa, and then he fought a dude that was like 5-2 or 7-2 or something. I don't think people thought that he really stood much of a chance against Ray Leonard.
Yeah, and I think one other thing worth putting into perspective as well is Roberto Duran had been a professional fighter for over 12 years by that point.
Yeah.
So it's not like he was a spring chicken.
And he was moving up in weight because I don't think he fought any fights at junior welterweight. I think he went straight to welterweight.
Well, technically he had fights above the limit. I think technically he had a few fights.
I'm talking about after the De Jesus fight, because I'm not sure. He might have fought Gonzalez, or he might have fought some of them guys at junior welterweight, but overall he pretty much went straight to the welterweight division.
Yeah, but didn't he? See, that's my thing is, didn't he jump up above the weight after the De Jesus, the third win, and then he had a few fights at welterweight. So it wasn't like he jumped right.
I think he fought Adolfo Vera at welterweight. And yeah, but that's my point. I don't think did he fight any of these guys at junior welterweight?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that he did.
Was it Vera?
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
because he fought like 6 or 7 fights, I think, before he fought Sugar Ray Leonard. I know Palomino, Gonzalez. I know those 4 fights were at welterweight. He fought Monroe Brooks. That is a fight that I'm not sure what that was at. Adolfo Viruet, I'm not sure there. But I think outside of those two, I think most everything else was welterweight.
Okay. Yeah, I think. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm looking now here, and it looks like I'm going to look at the Viruet fight just to see. So, yeah, it looks like he jumped up. It looks like technically he was a welterweight right after the third De Jesus fight.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but I wasn't sure because I think the entire intention, the whole time from him and Don King was to get a super fight with Sugar Ray Leonard.
Yeah, well, and they got it, but that is sort of my thing. I mean, it's not as if. I mean, the narrative seems to be that a lot of people that Duran jumped straight from 135 to 147, but he did have some acclimation beforehand. But I mean, still, you can't take the win away. I mean, it was a fantastic performance. I think Ray got caught up fighting Duran's fight, but I mean, the performance is so legendary that if you go on the forums, the Boxing 24 forums, which the classic section I still think is pretty rock solid, and there are some real knowledgeable guys there. They call him. It's such a iconic performance that they call him Montreal Duran. And they ask continuously, what welterweight in history beats that Duran? And I mean, I think the performance is worth putting on a pedestal. I mean, it was Ray Leonard, and it was Roberto Duran, and I don't think there are very many welterweights in history who would beat him. I'd favor, the usuals, Robinson, but, I mean, I don't know.
But the question is on that night. It's just
I just
March
think about
15th, 1971. On that night, I don't know if anybody that's a heavyweight beats Joe Frazier.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, there are just some performances that are so good. I mean, you do ask yourself, like, could Cassius Clay have beaten Joe Frazier that night? I mean, I know a lot of people say he was more nimble and whatnot, but he was less experienced, and I think he was a little less wily then. But and I think even Frank Laziero pondered this the other night about whether or not Frazier would have beat Cassius Clay, and I think it is worth asking. I mean, a lot of these questions are worth asking, but I mean, when you really look at the landscape, it's like, who do you think really beats that Duran that night? I don't know, because Sugar Ray Leonard is the closest thing, in my opinion, to Sugar Ray Robinson. And, if he's able to beat, Ray Leonard and Ray Robinson were very close physically. I mean, I think Leonard was 5'10", Robinson was 5'11". So again, similar build there, but similar fighting style as well. There was some difference, of course, but yeah, I mean, you figure he's even given Sugar Ray Robinson a tough outing. I mean,
yeah.
It wasn't.
And this is the thing. You remember the New York Times columnist? You may not be old enough to, but Dave Anderson.
I've heard the name, but I'm not familiar.
As Duran was entering the ring, Joe Frazier was sitting ringside. And Dave Anderson for the New York Times asked him if he had ever seen anybody that reminded him of Duran. And Frazier looked at him and said, yeah. And he never cracked a smile or anything. I think he meant this. He said, yeah, he reminds me of Charles Manson. And I mean, that night, Duran Leonard was one of the greatest fights of all time. And if you remember in the second round, Duran almost dropped Leonard.
Yeah, had him hurt.
And
right.
The other thing people got to realize is this. Duran didn't really win that fight easily because that was, I think, 2 of the judges had it by a point. One of the other judges had it by 2 points. But this is also the fight where I think that, 10 rounds were scored, even by almost every judge in the fight, too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because you'll get some different perceptions on that as well. Of course, you get that with just about any fight, but yeah, it's funny. I saw a rescoring of that on some of the forums as well, and some of these guys had it clear and away for Duran, but most people I think
had it
more like the
143 to 142 for Duran.
Yeah, I think most people had it about like you did, and it's funny because it is an iconic performance, but it is. I think people get carried away a bit, where they make it seem like it was some dominant performance. I mean, the way he did it is what really stands out, when you put things into perspective. But it's not as if Leonard was just completely out of his depth and, taking an ass whooping the whole time. No, he was he was competitive.
The fight was close as hell, and it was a great fight. And basically after that, you get the second Leonard fight, which to me, I mean, he made the weight. He was in shape. He got his ass kicked. He quit. It's pretty much that simple. He was the champion. He didn't have to take the fight that quickly.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it's not as if that was. I know this is my thing is, I know there's a lot of people who are like, yeah, he was partying and this and that. Like you said, though, he was the champ. He could have made the things on his terms, and it almost seems like he gets more excuses for that loss than just about anybody.
Yeah, but and there is no excuse for the way he lost. He quit.
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, how did he make weight if he was, just, I mean, I suppose he could have just boiled himself down and, he was doing these unhealthy practices to make the weight.
How about this, Jeremiah? What if Floyd Mayweather Jr. in the first fight with Marcos Maidana in like the 9th round would have just said to hell with it and walked away from him and quit?
Yeah, well, he'd never live that down.
No, but Roberto Duran, and the thing about Duran is, and my only problem with him, I still think he's one of the greatest fighters that ever lived. But after the Leonard fight, it's not like it's the only time it happened. Because when he fought Wilfred Benitez, and that was just like, I think it was like almost 2 years later or a year and a half later, he goes in to fight Benitez. And that was another non-performance to me.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, Benitez just looked... that was a fight that was pretty clear,
Yeah, but it wasn't scored clearly because Don King had his hand in it because I think one of the judges only had it like 143, 142, and the other two were like 144, 141. And I remember watching that fight, and I'm just like, Duran's done. I mean, he's quit again.
Yeah, no, like you said, it was almost like a non-performance. I mean, maybe you can chalk it up to stylistic, frustration. But I mean, Benitez, he clearly won that fight. But yeah, I mean, it was one of those performances where the guy's an all-time great, but you're wondering why the hell his performances are so up and down. And again, maybe it is a styles thing. Maybe he just couldn't reach Benitez and got frustrated. Maybe he had flashbacks of the Leonard fight. You know what I mean? Like maybe mentally that fight did a little something to him. And as soon as Benitez started, boxing his ears off a little bit, he just checked out mentally, right? And he just couldn't do much with him. That could be what it was. I mean, but like you said, I mean, that was a clear Benitez win.
Yeah, and then after that, immediately, he loses to Kirkland Lang, who I know there's a lot of British people that love Lang, but he was pretty much a nondescript fighter. He should not be beating Roberto Duran. It was the ring upset of the year. That fight was like in September, and the thing I remember was Duran was scheduled to face Tony Ayala Jr. on November 19th, 1982, but after the loss to Lang, the fight was canceled.
Yeah. Now messed up there, but of course, it's like the triumphant, the triumphant comeback where, yeah, it looked as if, hey, maybe his career's over at this point. Then he beats Cuevas, and then he goes and beats up Davey Moore in 8 rounds.
Yeah, and then really before Cuevas even, he fought Jimmy Batten. And the thing I remember about this was the walkout bout after Arguello Pryor won. I mean, it wasn't even in the main card. It was the walkout bout. And if you watch that fight, because you can find it on YouTube, everybody pretty much clears out the Orange Bowl by the 3rd round because, once again, it's a non-effort by Duran. Luckily for Duran, Jimmy Batten was nothing like Kirkland Lang, so he got the win. So it looked like he was done. And then I think he took like a year off, and he came back, and he battered Pepino Cuevas. And I think that's when people thought that maybe there was something there again. And then, of course, the Davey Moore fight, which wasn't that on his birthday?
What was that? June 16th, I think. And
yeah,
so
I'm pretty sure it was his birthday, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay. And I think Duran was a big underdog, like 3-1 or something. And the thing that really sticks out to me is Davey Moore didn't make the weight on his first attempt, and he had to go to a local gym and sweat off the excess pounds. But when you looked at it, I mean, the CBS broadcast, because they replayed it, because it was on closed circuit, I think, and then like a few weeks later they replayed it, and the CBS broadcaster was Sugar Ray Leonard, who congratulated him in the ring. And the Davey Moore win, for my money, outside of the Iran Barkley win, I think are his two greatest wins, just because what he'd come back from each time, and he beat a young, up-and-coming champion both times.
Yeah, Davey Moore looked like the goods. I mean, he was a damn talented fighter. I mean, in retrospect, you can look back and say, hey, you threw him in too soon. But you got to think of, again, you got to put these things in context, in their historical place.
Duran was done. That's why
yes,
they threw
exactly.
him in with him.
Right. I mean, because, again, put this into context. We're talking about a Roberto Duran who had been a pro since 1968. Okay, so we're talking about, he's 15 years on at this point or something like that. He's moving up in weight, right? He's already crossed. He's essentially in another traditional division. He's essentially in the historical middleweight division, and he's fighting a guy who looks like the goods. And then he just goes out and beats his ass and gives himself a nice little birthday present.
Yeah, and the birthday present is a shot against Marvin Hagler, which I watched this fight. I don't see it as close as Ovi Ovesen and Guy Jutras and all these guys did. I thought that Hagler clearly won the fight by 4 or 5 points. But when you look at this, after 13 rounds, Duran was ahead by 1 point on 2 scorecards, and even on the third, Hagler had his left eye swollen and cut, but he came on strong the last 2 rounds and got the win. So even if I thought Duran lost by 4 or 5 rounds to Marvin Hagler, that's pretty damn good for a guy that was the lightweight champion of the world just 5 years before that.
Hell yeah. I mean, because, again, let's put these things into context. I think this is the best way of evaluating them. What other lightweight champion of the world has a comparable performance? I mean, yeah, whether he lost clearly, and not, anything like a dominant performance for Marvin Hagler, but, even if he lost clear enough, what I liked about the performance was that he boxed more. So he goes out there and gets aggressive with Moore and cracks him and, gets him out of there in the 8th round. And then he shows another side, because he was a real versatile fighter, and he boxes with Marvin Hagler and does a pretty damn good job, while being physically undersized. And again, it's like put this into perspective. What other lightweights in history have been that competitive against a real middleweight great? Napoli's, he started off as a lightweight. He wasn't the lightweight champion. He was okay against Monzon. Joe Gons, he stepped up as high as welterweight. Benny Leonard. Yeah, but I don't see Garcia, the guy that he arguably
Garcia from Argentina, wasn't it?
Philippines. But
same damn thing.
Yeah. Close enough, right?
He's not an American. Go ahead.
Yeah. Forget.
Ceferino sounds Argentinian to me. I'm sorry.
Well, funny enough, that's because the Philippines. Again, I'm no historian, okay, but what I do know is the Spanish owned the Philippines, and I think in their parliament or in their government they speak Spanish. That's why you see a ton of Filipino fighters with Spanish names. Yeah. So that's part of it. Anyways, Garcia to me is not a great middleweight. If you're creating a list of the top 30, middleweights of all time, 40, 50, I'm not even sure he's up there. He was more effective at 147, to be honest with you. He did well up there, but again, it wasn't a particularly deep division at the time. So that is a noteworthy performance. That's a good one. Let's see, who else do we have? Jimmy McLarnin, Barney Ross, they never went that high. Pernell Whitaker got he went as high as 154. But nobody like Marvin Hagler. Shit, man. This is pretty. Sam Langford. Sam Langford is probably the only example I can think of right now, because he fought Joe Gons at 135, and he fought Stanley Ketchel, but of course it wasn't a real fight, but he did fight Stanley Ketchel and I think won a newspaper decision over the six round limit. So again, that's not as good a performance either. Jesus, man. I mean, really, I mean, maybe again, when you're not having a real bout, I just can't, newspaper decisions count for something, but you can't count them as, on the same playing field as official contests. So yeah, this Roberto Duran effort is pretty damn impressive.
All right. And then we go to a not as impressive effort against Thomas Hearns. And the thing that stood out to me was the fact that Duran really looked like he was going to his execution coming into ring, if you've ever watched that complete fight.
Yeah, I can't. I've seen the whole fight, but I can't say that I got that impression. But then again, I mean, you've got
Watch
better.
the walk. I'm talking about the walk-in when they're walking in, and I remember seeing the fight on closed circuit TV, and they show him in the dressing room. He didn't have the Charlie Manson eyes that night.
Yeah, Thomas Hearns did though.
Yeah, Thomas Hearns definitely did that night. And the thing that was interesting here is, and this is why a lot of people think Mike McCallum was ducked by Roberto Duran. Duran was stripped of the WBA junior middleweight title before that for fighting Hearns and not McCallum, the mandatory challenger. But my answer to that would be this. He wasn't going to get $1.85 million to fight Mike McCallum.
Nope. I mean, unfortunately, it's just as easy as that. I mean, again, we can talk about if there was one, title per division and and this sort of stuff. But I mean, if you're a fighter, and especially if you're Roberto Duran, and you've earned the right to make a boatload of money, you fight Thomas Hearns, and they might as well. They should have just strapped an executioner's hood on Thomas Hearns as he walked in the ring. You know how B-Hop used to do that early in his career? Yeah, Hearns should have did the same thing because he damn near took his head off. I mean, that was a frightening knockout.
And when we get towards the end, I think when you look that Duran's career started in what? Was it 67 or 68?
68.
Started in 68. In 1997, he beat Jorge Castro in Panama City. And Castro was a top 10 guy at the time. This is 30 years after Duran's career started.
I know. Incredible. I mean, it's incredible. And funny enough, before both the Jorge Castro fights, maybe we can get this guy on to talk about Roberto Duran too, but he fought a guy named Mike Colbert, who, a lot of people aren't going to recognize. But
I remember Mike Colbert.
Do you? Yeah, he's pretty active on Facebook, actually, and he talks about Roberto Duran a fair bit. So yeah, I mean, we could get that dude on as a guest and have him tell some stories.
Yeah, because he fought Duran, and Duran beat him, didn't he?
Yeah. What was it, a KO6, I think?
Yeah, but I actually remember Mike Colbert, but it may just be because I think that fight might have been, was that a USA Tuesday Night Fights?
I don't know.
We need John Einreinhofer right now because if I remember right,
the
fight was fought in West Virginia. Yeah, and they used to have fights from a casino. I forget what the casino was called, but they used to have fights from that casino. And I think that I saw Duran fight like 5 or 6 fights on USA Tuesday Night Fights when that was still popular. But then, of course, they fed Duran to William Joppy for the middleweight title in 1998. But then, of course, maybe his most impressive win was against Hector Camacho, who was coming off being knocked down by the great and brilliant Craig Houck from Greensburg, Indiana. And
Legend.
Yes, a legend in his own mind. But, so his last fight, he fought Hector Camacho. He lost a unanimous decision. And that, as they say, is all she wrote. But that's a career that lasted 33 years.
You know what's so cool about that, though? I mean, no wonder why they make documentaries and movies about this guy. I mean, this guy is, I mean, again, just watch the movie, okay? So, I can't divulge, near as much information as they're going to say on the movie, but it's just interesting thinking about a guy who's, he's sleeping in doorways and then he's, fighting as what's he start out as like a bantamweight, in his career in the 60s. and then he's like banging, he's like banging guys out across, the world, and fighting. It's just interesting that he starts as a bantamweight in Panama, and then he's fighting casinos in West Virginia. It's
Yeah,
I don't
and
know.
dude,
It's
this
just
is the thing. He fought Ken Buchanan in Buchanan's prime, and he fought William Joppy in William Joppy's prime.
I mean, those guys are like generations apart. It seems.
Yeah, because they are. Because when you look at it, Ken Buchanan at the time William Joppy's fighting Roberto Duran is probably in his 50s.
Yep. No, you're right.
So, yeah, he had an amazing career. There are some definite black marks on his career. But overall, he's one of the greatest fighters of all time. And I need to find out where we can watch this documentary. There's got to be someplace.
Yeah, somewhere. I have to watch the video again and see if I can pinpoint some details. But I only saw it once before I came.
I'm typing into a Google search. Where can I find I Am Duran, and we'll see what happens. It's got to be better. Just so you know, it has to be better than the Hands of Stone movie, which absolutely sucked.
Well, except for the tits.
Yeah. Christopher Shelton loved those titties in that movie.
I can hear him breathing heavy still.
Yeah, and I love Christopher. So, Christopher, if you're listening, I'm just playing. But it was funny. Because the tits were so good that he said that when we did our top 10 boxing movies of all time, he ranked the movie like 8th just on boobs alone.
Well, I mean, that's stupid, but the tits were top notch.
So, is it really stupid if the boobs are top notch?
Yeah, it is. I mean, come on, a movie's a lot more about boobs unless I'm watching porn, man. I don't care about all that.
Oh, hell. Yeah, it says here the release date was 2018 and also 2019. So, I have no clue where we find this.
Okay. Well, they better get their shit together so we can all know.
Yeah, that would be nice. But
maybe we're just being dumbasses. Who knows?
Yeah, probably. All right, Jeremiah, we are about done for this evening. We will be back tomorrow night at 11. And I don't know what we'll talk about. We'll talk about something. We'll preview the fights coming up a little bit because I didn't get to be on the show with you guys Sunday since she decided to do it without telling me. I'm just kidding. But I want to remind everybody, make sure you go to any place, including iTunes, or especially iTunes, rate our podcast. Make sure you follow the Grueling Truth the Grueling Truth boxing page at TGTN Boxing on Twitter. You can follow the Grueling Truth at Grueling Truth. You can send us questions like Matt Jeremy did tonight. Also, you can hear us everywhere sports podcasts are played. We will have some info on Zeno Live Radio, which should be coming out here in the next week or two. We'll have an app on there. You can download our app off of iTunes also. So there's multiple ways to get us. Jeremiah, do you have anything you want to sign off with?
Yeah, I want to say not only is there multiple ways to listen to us, there are multiple ways to contact us. So, yeah, I mean, you can find me on my Facebook page. I mean, just Jeremiah Preisser. I mean, it's a public page. I got a ton of friends on there. I like the chit chat. That's my preferred method of communication. You can find me on Twitter. My handle is Griffo's Hanky. In honor of young Griffo, the old Australian fighter. You can find us at TGTN Boxing. That's the handle. At Grueling Truth. That's the main handle. Find us. Get a hold of us. You can even comment on Spreaker if you want. So, message me on Twitter, whatever it takes, man.
If you want to talk to us, you can find us. And if you want to be on the show, you're more than welcome. All right, guys, we are going to go ahead and we're going to wrap it up for tonight. I want to remind everybody, you can hear us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, YouTube. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find the Grueling Truth. So for Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to the Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.